guys, my name is Joseph Barron, and today I'll be doing my informative presentation on appraising real estate. Um, Appraising real estate encompasses pretty much any type of property out there, commercial or residential, and it could be an existing building, it could be proposed construction of a building, or it could be just vacant land. And appraising those properties is basically just determining the value of those properties and what sort of value the market would give to that property. I'll explain that more in detail throughout the presentation, but I've come to know a lot about appraising through my job. I work at a bank in the appraisal review department, and what I get to do there is order all of the appraisals for the bank, because whenever the bank does a loan that is secured by real estate, meaning there's some sort of collateral or attached to the loan that is like a house or some other building or property, or it may just be getting a mortgage, buying a house, selling a house. The bank when they're involved in that transaction, they need to know what the value is of that property, and that's where appraisers come in. And so I get to contract these appraisers, hire them on a case-by-case basis, and they determine the value for us, and the bank relies on that appraisal in their lending decisions. And so one of the important things to remember with real estate values is that it is a huge determining factor in the economic health of the society. It's really important to understand what role real estate plays in the economy. Whenever there's been a recession, usually there's the value of real estate is involved, whether it was inflated or too low or too high. Whenever there's an extreme reaction in the economy, typically real estate value is concerned. And so it's really important to remember the role that it plays. And one of those ways that the value of real estate can affect the economy as a whole and possibly lead to a recession is when real estate values increase more quickly than wages. So for example, right now in Utah, we are experiencing rapid appreciation rates in the real estate market and not so rapid increases in wage rates. So minimum wage is still pretty low. If you get an annual raise at your job, you're pretty lucky. And so keeping up with general inflation every year is really a struggle here. But real estate values are increasing even faster. And so what happens when years down the road, if houses keep going up in value and you're not making enough money to even buy a house at that point, then no one's going to be able to buy houses. And so then the prices will come down because no one's going to be able to buy anything. And because no one's buying, people are renting, and it really just messes with the economy, and it can throw society into a recession when those real estate values get too inflated or too high. So the next thing to remember about appraising is the need for it in the first place. Banks and credit unions, like I said before, use the value of these properties as a basis for their lending decisions. So when someone comes in to buy a house and they say, I can put $20,000 down and the house is $120,000, which doesn't really happen in Utah, but let's use those numbers for easy math. So if it's $120,000 is the cost, they put $20,000 down, they need a loan of $100,000. But the bank doesn't want to loan out that money if the house isn't worth at least $100,000. Because if that loan goes bad and they can't pay their money back, then the bank will repossess that house, and now they're sitting on a house where the money they lent out they weren't able to get back, and it's not even worth the amount that they were loaning to that customer. And so they need to be protected in case this property, or in case the loan doesn't get paid back. They need to make sure that the asset, the home, is going to hold its value and is going to be worth as much, if not more, than what they're letting the customer borrow. And so knowing the value of these properties is crucial in making lending decisions for banks and credit unions and other financial institutions. One of the common misconceptions in real estate is what determines value and what the differences are between cost, price, and value. Simply put, cost is the dollar value, which is a fact. It is not, there's no gray area, it's black and white. It did cost exactly this much to build this home or this building. That's the cost. The price is what it is being sold for and what someone will pay for it and what someone is buying it for. So the agreed upon price. So the price can change. The price is not the value though, because someone can list a home for $300,000, but if no one's willing to pay that much for it, then it's probably not worth much. And so the price is subject to change because it all depends on what people are willing to pay. And the buyers and sellers have to come to an agreement on a rational price. Now the value is an opinion. And the value is derived from the market. So in this part of the presentation, you can see that there's different factors that go into the value or the market value. So the location is a big deal, right? Like a home in Salt Lake City is going to cost more than a home in Nephi, Utah, or out in Vernal. You know, the area has a really big effect on the value. How old is the property? What condition is it in? Is it new? Is it renovated? Is it falling apart? Does it need to be condemned? What neighborhood is it in? There's a lot of different things to consider. And because these conditions are all changing, the value is constantly changing and is not fact, because value is in the eye of the beholder, but market value is in the eye of the majority of the beholders, if that makes sense. So that's important to remember, because when you find value in the market, it's important to remember that it's not just what one person or two people will pay for it. When you're finding value, it's what will the majority of people in the area be willing to pay for this. And you find that by looking at the different properties and elements of a house or a building. For example, if somebody wants to build a house and it costs $500,000 to build it, and the appraised value only comes in at $450,000. Well, if the cost to build it includes an elevator in the house, well, that's not something people really look for when they're buying a house typically. So one or two people, maybe a few people might be interested in paying more for a house that has an elevator. The market as a whole, meaning society and an area, a demographic of people, probably aren't willing to pay more for a house that has an elevator. So when you're building a house or selling a house or buying a house, it's important to remember these different considerations and elements that go into the value of a home, and what will the market as a whole be willing to pay for something like this. Just because you think it's worth more doesn't mean the market will think it's worth more, and appraisers have to go off of market value. Lastly, it's crucial to remember that appraisals are just opinions. They are not factual. If you know, in my job all the time, we have two appraisers that have maybe appraised the same property, and the values come in very different because of the comparable sales that they use. They're looking at other properties that are similar to see what they have sold for and what people have paid for them to determine what this property might be worth. And I've seen two appraisals on the same property come in very different, and that's because of their opinions. And it's good to have that, because it kind of helps keep things balanced. Because if everybody comes in at the same, then it makes it look like it's very rigid and systematic, but the truth is inflation, appreciation, changes in costs and values and prices, there's really not a huge pattern to it. It's just kind of free flowing, and that is dependent on supply and demand. And so as home prices continue to rise, appraisers have to be mindful of that and take that into consideration. But what appraisers need to be careful of is to not give too much value to a home just because home prices are rising. So if like in Utah, properties are going up in value, well, we don't want to give too much value to these properties, because if they go too high, then like I said earlier, people aren't going to be able to buy them and we could go into a recession. So we need to be a little bit conservative in appraising homes, that we don't give too much value, because if we do, it could be dangerous in the long run and it could really have a negative effect on the economy. And so I would say spreading awareness of appraisals and the fact that they are simply just opinions is crucial, because a lot of people get bent, get get fixated on the fact that appraisals determine a value, and they think, oh, my house is only worth this much because this guy said it is. Well, he's a professional, so it's probably pretty accurate, but it is just an opinion, and opinions change and values change. And so I hope you guys remember that as you get out there and learn more about real estate and get involved in real estate transactions.